Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Fazbear Entertainment would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, Freddy Fazbear.
Rewritten! Hey everyone, okay, I'll try to make this quick, but having a talk before or after an episode is going to be a thing that I add now because the schedule for releasing this thing might get hectic in the future. So right now, I'm done with pretty much every episode until episode 10, which is the first and second act, pretty much. But I can't predict the future and don't know if I'll be able to release the others by the time that I'm done with these. So I want to just lay out the schedule right here and say that I will post as many episodes as I can. Every episode at about 3 o'clock or so. Well, not really 3. It's 3 o'clock for me because I start to post it, but usually it takes like 45 minutes for it to actually load. But, you know, I'll start to post at 3 o'clock and it probably will get released by maybe 4. But, you know, anyway, in that general area, I'll post an episode if it's ready. So for like the next 10 weeks, you guys won't see any differences. But once I get into the third act, I'll put a section like this inside of the video, like the episode, to tell you guys that I'm, like, if I'm ready for the next episode or not, and when you can expect it once I'm done and able to actually post it. So, yeah, I just wanted to come and make my schedule more clear to everyone so you know what to expect as I finish voice acting and editing this series. So, I hope you guys like what I have to offer so far, and thank you all for your continued support. It means the world to me. So, anyway, time for me to shut up and let you watch the episode already. Bye! With a vicious crack, Sun's head twisted around at an impossible angle, eyes flaring open, rolling back until only the whites showed. From slots that Gregory hadn't noticed before, his clothing slid in and then out, flipping to show the other side of the fabric, engulfing the scarlet colors with dark midnight blue fabric, dotted with dozens of tiny yellow stars. With that part done, his body rolled over with another quick snap, lining back up with the direction that his head had been twisted. A long, slithering nightcap whipped down from his head in the sunbeam's place, the jingling golden bell from his chest now hanging off at the end, the length reaching his knees, the thing curling independently like a third arm. Finally, a part of Sun's face spun out of view behind the golden half, revealing another side that had been hidden until now, one that was blacked out into shadows. A crescent moon. Gregory finally understood who Sun had been talking to all this time. Moon smiled, closing his eyes and taking in a deep, satisfied breath. The thing immediately contorted its body around, each limb sticking out at the wrong angle as he spun his way off the ground, his head staying lined up with Gregory no matter which direction his neck had to bend. Before, Sun had kept their shared body crouched most of the time, probably to not intimidate him, but whoever had control now didn't seem to care how huge he was compared to children. He unfolded himself slowly, his spindly body rising further and further up, towering above Gregory easily. Most of his deep blue self melted into the new darkness, nothing but a black silhouette, much too tall and skinny for anything natural. His limbs were like an arachnid's, long fingers more like needles, the tiny golden bells decorating his jester-like outfit, clinking and clacking with every raspy breath he took. He could count every tooth in his mouth, a twisted, excited grin stretched onto his half-gold and half-dark face. He was like something out of a nightmare. Gregory couldn't move under the shadowy figure. He only stared, mouth hanging open, heart palpitating in fright. He never would have expected for this to be possible. Never ever would he have thought that what Sun was afraid of would be something hiding inside his own body, his own mind. His blazing golden eyes finally snapped open and rolled around to the front of his head to shine down on him like searchlights. The white pupils dilated into glassy discs, like a cat about to pounce, fixating on him, on his target. "Hello there," Moon said, voice at a gravelly whisper that didn't sound like Sun at all. "Can we skip to the part where I drag you in? I already know you're one of Afton's capture bots." Afton. It was a name that was only spoken in low, frightened voices, making parents hug their children closer. Everyone knew what Afton had done after what Henry told the public, but nobody knew what happened to him afterwards. It was not a name that was taken lightly, not something that adults tolerated for jokes or pranks. And this moon-faced thing was serious, far too serious. "What?" Gregory squeaked out. "How did you do that? What did you do with Sun?" Moon shuddered with a dry laugh, hunching over to lean all the way down to Gregory's eye level, his head twisting upside down to peer at him curiously, each word he spoke almost at a whisper, crackling like pebbles in flint, regaining a collected, confident demeanor that was only barely audible against the frantic beating of Gregory's heart. "I know you're in there, Afton," he said. He tapped his spider-like fingers on Gregory's nose, making him recoil. "Don't try to play dumb with me. I know you're one of his little robots." "Can you see me right now, or are you just recording everything?" He twisted his head back upright, seeming rather amused. I'm not a little robot," Gregory argued, a strange flare of annoyance coming at his condescending pokes. "What are you talking about?" "I am not going to waste time explaining things that you already know about," Moon said, voice low in annoyance as he straightened back up, his smile stabbing up into his round cheeks, individual teeth glinting from the yellow light of his eyes. "I have been looking all over for you for so long, and I feel like it's only fair that your capture bot drops the innocent child act and comes with me." He considered that, glancing up and then shrugging casually. "Or you could kick and scream and make this fun for everyone. I am not against taking you apart screw by screw until we'll need your blueprints to put you back to..." He broke off from that, yelling to nobody in an unexpected burst of rage. "Oh, go to sleep, Sonny! I don't want to hear it!" It had been so loud in comparison to his previous whisper, Gregory nearly fainted from shock, falling several steps back away from the unstable animatronic. Moon shook his head, taking several slow, measured breaths, settling down again. "No, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. I'm calm." His eyes flared open again to focus on him once he collected himself back to the even steadiness that he had carried before. His finger jabbed towards him with every syllable, vibrating with a quiet, barely restrained intensity. "I am not crazy. Nobody believes me, but I don't care. I am not crazy." He opened his accusatory pointing hand, instead reaching towards him, each nail twitching with eagerness. "And you are coming with me." "Wait, I'm not a capture bot," Gregory said, snapping out of the stunned silence. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, really?" Moon straightened up, grinning even wider. "Then just let me bring you to Vanessa, and she can give you her opinion." "No, I can't go to Vanessa. You don't understand," Gregory squeaked, regretting every life decision up to this point. "I'm not a capture bot. There has to be some sort of way for me to prove it, right? Just..." Gregory's back hit the generator as he tried to get away from the advancing animatronic. Just calm down, and I'll find a way to show you." Moon paused, seeming to think it over, but that brief glimpse of hope was snatched away when he shook his head and chuckled. The crescent-faced animatronic straightened up once he caught his breath, eyes fixating onto his, the laughter cutting out like a light bulb being shattered. In its place was cold, undying hatred. Moon's hands split open and peeled back out of sight into his forearms, opening up jagged holes at the end of his wrists. A glistening tangle squirmed out into view in place of either hand, a cluster of thin black wires, writhing like handfuls of worms. Each wire was tipped in a small crescent hook that caught the light in white flashes as all of them twitched and bobbed in the air. Weapons. Deadly weapons. Why did he have those? A part of him asked, as if arguing would make those razor-sharp blades disappear. Was he actually going to... "No, that's not gonna work for me." Moon grinned, already leaning in to pounce. "How about, instead, I rip you open and find out for myself?" It was like the playground had collapsed beneath Gregory. Gregory did the only thing that his panicking mind could think of. He rounded the Fazwatch's light right up into Moon's face. Immediately, Moon hissed and tumbled back, the wires curling over his face to block the light. Gregory fell over in shock, still pointing the beam at the grumbling animatronic, the cone of white jerking around in the dark from how much his arms were shaking. Gregory fell upon the generator one last time, pulling the lever again, trying to turn it back on. It lay dormant, unresponsive as a corpse. There was some sort of cranking thingy, right? He had to pull something, right? Where was it? He didn't know how to undo this horrible mistake. Gregory had no time to figure it out. He looked back to Moon. Unfortunately, the flashlight defense didn't last long. Moon rubbed his eyes and turned his head back around to look at him, glaring through the light and raising upwards again, not affected by it any longer. His disfigured wire hands slid against each other in agitated ticks, like 1,000 tapping needles raising up like cobras preparing to strike. His back bumped against something light. He turned. A cylindrical foam block tower. Gregory took in a breath, readied himself, and kicked it over. Clean up! Clean up! Gregory bolted. Adrenaline flooded through his bloodstream, pushing him to dodge out of reach of the hooked wires. Moon twisted midair, trying to reach him, but was forced to reach to the blocks instead. Gregory whisked through the small tower's door, slamming it shut. Thinking fast, he worked his fingers into the safety lock and turned the real lock, shutting it behind him tightly. Moon pounded on it a moment after, trying the handle. It wouldn't open for him, of course. Not waiting to see if that would hold him off, Gregory fled down the level below that one, trying his best to feel his way around. He couldn't see a thing down here. His shoulder smacked into something, making him fall into his front against a rubbery floor, the darkness clawing at him with uncertainty. Gregory stayed where he was, hunkered to the ground, blinking fast to try and adjust. Moon's frustrated cries were heard as he tried to bash the door down. Gregory was about to get up and continue floundering around blindly, but instead, Moon fell silent. Goosebumps perkled up over his skin. The only sign that he wasn't gone was the jangling of his bells. Where was he? Where was he? Gregory gasped for breath, peeking around the pillar that he was hunkered behind. The door was still closed. He began to get up and go to feel his way around the rest of the play place, unsure which direction he was. I can hear you breathing, you know. The whisper had been right behind his ear. Gregory snapped his head around, horror shocking him frozen. The half-faced thing was hanging on the outside of the play structure. Moon's spindly shadow was completely upside down, like a giant arachnid. His nightcap clung to the supportive poles as an extra limb, while his wire hands tied around pieces of the foam wall. His head tilted at an unnatural angle, golden eyes fixated onto Gregory, a grin growing on his spinning half-face. Ah! Gregory cried out and tumbled backwards, accidentally falling down the hole of the floor to the next level. He slammed to a stop, gasping and reaching around to try and gain a sense of direction. No, run! His eyes darted around, finding nothing. It was still too dark, shadows engulfing everything, the pitiful amount of starlight coming from the walls not helping at all. He wanted to turn on the fast watch, but he knew that the light would give him away. All he could do was listen. Moon's jangling bells were descending, crawling along the outside of the play place, each movement slow and practiced. He was coming closer. Gregory hid in a corner whenever it became clear he wouldn't find the exit in time, trying to quiet his breaths. He could kind of see now, kind of. The ends of some obstacles stuck out on the left wall, a rope bridge hanging above him, but that was all that he could catch a glimpse of. His heart and lungs pounded with urgency, each breath shaky and much too loud. He was there. He could hear him. He was so close. Moon's machinery clicked and creaked as he crept around the outside of the play place, his bells jangling from every direction at once. He didn't dare to move. Where was he? Where? Somewhere to the left. He saw nothing but darkness in that direction. Wait, be still, be quiet. Gregory's eyes fixated on the first sign of movement, violent shudders running up his insides. A thin, lanky arm slowly reached down from the outside of the play place, his hooked wires clinging to the beams as the rest of him lowered, limb after limb. He was still upside down, moving with careful precision, tilting his head back and forth as he listened. Gregory stared at the silhouette, lungs burning. Leave, he prayed in his head. Please, just leave. He didn't. He wouldn't. Dizziness dampened Gregory's thoughts, vision blurring. He couldn't hold his breath there any longer. He took in a tiny gasp. Moon's fire eyes twitched, the rest of him stiffening. No, stay quiet, stop breathing. Gregory clung on to hope that he'd move along. The midnight purple animatronic held on with his cap in arms, letting go with his feet and flipping over so his legs were downwards again, the joints in his shoulders and neck bending at angles that were impossible for a normal human. And then, the hooks on his hand began to extend. The twine-thin wires slithered into the gaps of the place's plastic walls, crawling and sliding across the rubbery floors. Gregory couldn't move. Oh, no, this wasn't happening. He couldn't be doing this. He was supposed to be safe in the place. It was unfair. The hooks pricked their way towards him in a network, like a spider spinning a web. Gregory finally tore his eyes away from the sight, looking back up to Moon. His dilated eyes were fixated directly on his hiding spot, blinding as a star against the black. Then, out of nowhere, one of Moon's eyes spazzed off and on like an old light bulb, a yelp of "Oh no!" puncturing the awful silence. Moon shuddered, tucking his head down, struggling against something invisible. A glitching, choked voice tried to escape him, bits of the sunbeams poking out from his face. Taking that chance, Gregory burst out of the corner, leaping over the web of hooked wires, trying to find some other place to hide. Hide. He had nowhere to go. He couldn't find the square hole yet. He stole a glance back, legs wobbling and heart pounding. Moon flattened the orange triangles back into his head, overcome with the brief disturbance. But Gregory was already gone, searching along the floor. The wires pursued him, snapping at his heels, trying to... There! He spotted the hole that led to the next level. Gregory dove for it, climbing down the short rope ladder and landing on more rubbery floors. He threw himself down into a plastic tunnel and crashed below the looking window, holding his breath again while his eyes darted around, trying to find the next hole. Moon's wires retracted, the jangling signaling that he was moving further down the outside. His gangly shadow passed over the circular window, the hooks dragging across curved surfaces, bright eyes peeking inside. Gregory ducked behind the corner. He had no idea if it had been fast enough. The shadow crawled away, moving over to the left, out of sight. It was so quiet here now. It felt like a physical presence, like a poisonous cloud that was forcing its way down his lungs, scraping his throat dry, pouring sweat down his back. Gregory hated it so much. He wanted to cry and scream, anything that would break the awful, oppressive silence. He'd always hated hide-and-seek. Gregory got up, eyes watering, scooting back out of the tunnel, trying to find the next place to go down. Moon's bells were everywhere. On the left, maybe, then the right. His mechanical parts clicked and clacked, tickling around the outside walls, hunting for any trace of him. Gregory hunkered to the ground, terror welling up in his throat, unable to see where he was. He found the next square hole, sliding down a short slide, shooting out the end to fall face first into the plastic foam on the next level. Too loud, he'd been too loud. He couldn't breathe, he needed to breathe, he was going to faint. Moon's eyes flashed from behind something, his footsteps thumping closer. Gregory hid beneath an obstacle beam just as the shadow flickered into view. It passed by, tortuously slow, each grip exchanged evenly and carefully as he climbed. He was on the other side of the wall that he was hiding against. Right there, the little ticks of his mechanical insides creeping up into his ears like a colony of termites. Gregory closed his eyes, every heartbeat painful against his lungs, praying for him to go on, just go on, come on, please. Something was inches away from him. His eyes flared open, staring in paralyzed horror. The wires slithered from behind an obstacle beam, Moon nowhere in sight, but right on top of him all at the same time. The little hooks prodded around, bobbing up and down as they tested the air like antennae. He was trapped in a corner. Gregory got up, the wires jolting as they sensed movement, blood roaring in his ears as he tried to find out where to go. No, he had to. There was still a little space for him to dodge past, but if the hooks felt him and grabbed on... Gregory kicked himself into action, leaping gingerly over the swaying hooks, several nearly catching on his shoelaces. Cold terror sliced up his back as he staggered out past them, escaping down the next square hole in the floor, trying all that he could to hold back a scream. Quiet, be quiet. The horrible silence continued, only broken by Moon's jangling bells. He was choking on that silence, unable to draw breath from it, the air damp with his own sweat. Every beat of his heart thudded like a bass drum through his skull, inside straining against the restrictive breath-holding, begging for him to give in, to give up, just get this over with, anything that wouldn't involve being quiet for another moment. He somehow kept it all trapped inside, maybe by a miracle or just a desperate need to survive. He carefully stepped around the slithering wires whenever they searched for him again, putting his shoes down carefully, not letting them brush a single fiber against the tiny crescent hooks, doing all that he could to stay away from them. Stop breathing, stop, keep going, faster, he can hear you, he's catching up. All the while, the spider-like silhouette of Moon crawled around the outer walls, joints cracking into ridiculous angles as he twisted his body around to cling from one beam to the other. He hunted for him, listening carefully, while Gregory struggled to suppress the child's urge to cry. He almost missed Moon's voice. Accusations of things Gregory hardly understood would be better than this calculated, predatory hunt. He was almost to the bottom of the place. He couldn't tell how much longer he had to survive this, but he was about halfway to the floor at this point, maybe further. Moon was on the left. Maybe. He wasn't entirely sure. He couldn't see him right now. Gregory kept himself low, taking each step as lightly as he could, ears full of fog. Jingle. Gregory froze. He was getting close, too close. He ducked behind an obstacle, not knowing which side of the walls he had to hide from, a sickening dread slowly making its way up his spine. Spindly limbs crossed over the starlight on the left. He waited there, hanging just out of sight, not making a sound. Move along, he prayed in his thoughts. Just go, please. Moon wasn't moving. Gregory needed air, badly. Go, keep going. He clamped his hands over his mouth, the pressure building in his chest, lungs beginning to kick against him. Come on, keep moving, please. Moon broke out of the position, beginning to crawl further down. Gregory took a tiny breath. Moon stopped. No, he needed more air, but he couldn't let anything in. He knew Moon would... The circular head spun in his direction, nightcap curling up onto a new beam. The scraping and clicking of hooks drew closer to him, closer, the glistening wires slithering across the rubbery floor. Gregory took in another breath, the blood rushing up to his head, the world teetering unsteadily. Movement above him. He looked up. Hooks were spilling over the top of the beam that he had hidden beneath, dangling down towards the top of his head, reaching. Don't scream, he told himself. Get out. Gregory backed out from beneath the obstacle as fast as he could, hitting the outer wall and staggering in another direction. He couldn't take it. He let out a breath, gulping air down. Immediately, the hooks rose and struck at him like rattlesnakes. He ducked just out of reach, hearing them tear at a piece of foam just above his head. Gregory ran for a few steps, then slowed down, throat sealed shut as he put each shoe down quietly. There was a square hole waiting for him. Every piece of his skin was taut and zapping with currents of urgency, the awful clacking of Moon skittering up over the sides of the wall, gaining on him. Gregory was almost there. He could see the ground floor of the daycare. Just one more drop, just a little bit longer. He just had to... Gregory skidded to a stop, snapping his head back and forth. Moon's silhouette blocked up a part of the left. The wires were crawling over the floors, the walls feeling every surface for traces of them, drawing nearer with every breath Gregory dared to take. Gregory clamped his hands over his mouth again, pressing himself to the floor, terror scraping its way through every bone in his body. There it was, the last square hole, freedom in his sight. Gregory stayed, quivering, not wanting to move an inch with Moon so close. He had to wait, but the wires were gaining on him, about to cut off his only exits. And then, just as he was about to try jumping over them, they retracted. The wires slipped back out of the place, retracing their steps to Moon's shadow. The dark animatronic crawled downwards, out of sight. Not bothering to wonder what he was doing, Gregory darted to the square hole, dropping through it, spinning around, trying to find the arching exit. There it was, right there, waiting for him! He made a break for it. And then Moon abruptly dropped down from above, landing expertly on his feet right in the archway. Gregory fought back a squeal of fear, backtracking, throwing himself behind a wide pillar, the darkness around him humming and spazzing with energy. Run! His instincts screamed, just go, run! But he knew he wouldn't make it. He had to sit there, hands gripped over his nostrils and mouth, burning from the inside out, unable to breathe. He needed to... I know you're here, Moon whispered from behind the pole, calm and cold. Come on out already. Things like you never get away from me. Gregory didn't respond. He was trembling and strangling himself, tears leaking down his face uncontrollably. The column he had hidden behind was only just wide enough to block him from view. He couldn't do this. He couldn't. Please, you can't. Moon's shadow shifted from one side of the pole to the other, just out of sight, right behind him, listening. Leave, Gregory pleaded in his thoughts. Just leave. Moon took a step in the playground. No, this wasn't happening. He was so close. He couldn't. Movement. Gregory's eyes fixated on something beside him. The hooks. They were creeping along the floor, glinting in the dim light, slithering around the right side of the column that he was pressed against. No. This was it. He was going to die. One of the black wires coiled and looped its way towards him, the little hooks tapping, only inches away. Get away. He had to move. He lifted his foot, scooting towards the left, but he knew Moon would see him. He knew he would see him and catch him, and the wires brushed against him, a tremor rattling up their network. No! The same glitching, spastic voice broke through the hook, stalling. Moon's shadow had the little sunbeam triangles trying to poke out, fighting back for just long enough. Gregory couldn't take it anymore. He swung his way from behind the column, running right at Moon, who snatched the hooks back, covering the sides of his face as its audio sensors overloaded. Run! Several sensations whisked past him, all too fast to really comprehend. Moon's fiery eyes upon him, the slashing of his catchers, the arching exit of the play place rushing behind him as he burst out into the ground level of the daycare. Gregory was screaming, crying, tripping and fumbling through the hungry darkness, icy shards stabbing up through his throat and lungs, cutting right down to his throbbing, roaring heart. Don't look back, keep going! His foot was brought down on nothing but empty air. He took a tumble, stomach hurtling through his mouth, becoming engulfed by unseen plastic balls. No, it was the ball pit. He had to escape the... Gregory kicked out, still screaming as loud as he could, the wild jangling of Moon right behind him at the edge of the pit. He swiped and stroked through the bits of plastic, kicking hard, throwing them out of the way in his rush, but it wasn't fast enough. The dim light of the fake stars filtered down from the walls, catching the edge of the rainbow-colored slide that he had come down through. There, the only way out! Gregory made a break for that slide, plowing through the ball pit as fast as he could, all too slowly, Moon nearly on top of him already. The hook snapped through the air, reaching out to him, trying to catch on his clothes. Gregory flailed, reaching only a few inches from the exit of the slide. Further, come on, he had to stretch further, almost there. He finally managed to touch the tip of it. Gregory hauled himself up, banging both shins on the edge and slamming his head up into the ceiling. He didn't care, though, scrambling up the narrow space, shoes slipping and fingers scraping against the grooves of the thin plastic tunnel. Keep going, don't look back! His footsteps were joined by Moon's, the thud of him landing, sending a powerful vibration through Gregory's entire skeleton. Gregory shrieked in panic, Moon's thumping footsteps banging through the whole world, closer and closer behind him, the thuds and jangles right on top of him, right there, too close! Gregory fought for his life up the slide, hitting his head again and again, slipping and kicking out and grasping desperately at the slippery walls, the incline fighting against him. There it was! The slide opened up, only a few meters above his head. Freddy's blue eyes beamed down at him like a shooting star, reaching out, trying to help. Gregory flailed his arms upwards, but just before their fingers met, a tangled clump of wires snapped taut around his shoe. Gregory screamed louder than he ever had before, skin peeling off of the plastic walls as he was yanked back down, hooks digging into his flesh, tearing it up into ribbons. No, this couldn't be happening. The wires were extending now, wrapping thicker and thicker layers around his shoe, tightening with each new loop. "Freddy, help!" he cried out. The animatronic's huge metal hand dove down the slide, snatching up Gregory's arm, pulling. Gregory became the rope in a deadly game of tug-of-war, Moon yelling for Freddy to let go, Gregory's arm nearly being popped out of its socket as Freddy struggled to keep him up. Panic seared up his body, lighting every nerve on fire. No, these crazy robots were going to pull him apart! Thinking fast, Gregory lifted his other knee, bringing the heel down on Moon's face. It didn't work right at first, missing and only brushing the edge of his nightcap. He kicked again, missing and hitting his shoulder. Come on, harder, kick harder, you idiot! Gregory was yanked again by both of them, something popping in his shoulder. He kicked once, and this time brought it down right on Moon's eye. He kept on kicking and kicking, wrenching his caught foot up at the same time, fiery pain lashing up his leg. And then, with one last kick, he was free. The shoe, snared in Moon's hooks, slipped right off, releasing him. The moment that Moon's grasp was gone, Freddy pulled him up out of the slide, saving him from the tight tunnel. Gregory smacked into the animatronic's hard shell, Moon's voice right behind him as he tried to follow. "What are you doing?" Moon screeched, his dilated eyes burning through the darkness, lurching up the slide, trying to escape gravity's pull, right behind him, lunging. Freddy swept Gregory out of reach, lifting his tree trunk-sized leg, and delivered a powerful kick right down on Moon's pointed nose. Moon slipped and fell. His metal hook scraped horribly against the plastic walls all the way down, the cat's limb useless if nothing to grab onto. Moon was whisked out of view, his yells for backup fading into a crash at the very bottom. He was gone. Gregory clung to Freddy, gulping down air, not believing quite yet that he was still able to breathe at all. He was numb, shaking. He felt like he might throw up. Everything was cold. So cold. Are you okay, Gregory? Freddy's deep, rumbling voice brought him out of the frozen stupor. Gregory looked up at the big bear, emotion returning all too quickly. Let me out of here! I want to get out! He started sobbing, thoughts spasming into a pained desperation as he crumpled up under the weight of it all. Please, I want to go home! I promise I won't be bad anymore, I just want to go home! You're okay, I've got you, Freddy was saying, trying to comfort him. We have to get you away from here, okay? Without much warning, Freddy descended on him, his big hairy arms scooping him up and lifting him from the ground. Gregory cried out, the fear peaking again, expecting to be torn apart any second now. I know, I'm sorry, Freddy said, a helpless look on his face. But I have to carry you, your leg is damaged, just try to be quiet. Gregory hid his face in the bear's fuzzy chest, trying to stifle the whimpers that were trying to escape him. He didn't really know what he felt about Freddy right now. He wanted to get down and run away as fast as he could, but so far Freddy was being careful, cradling him gently. It felt a little nice, despite the instinctual wariness he had of the giant bear. And he realized with a bit of relief, if Freddy wanted Gregory to be killed, he would have left him to Moon. Gregory scolded himself. Don't let your guard down. Nobody would ever want to help him for no reason. Freddy carried him away, the dark world passing in a blur. Every nerve in his body was shot, his ears ringing, eyes zipping from the walls to the glassy ceiling, expecting for the horrible moon-faced thing to leap out at him at any moment. The shock was wearing off all too slowly, as he recognized that he wasn't in danger anymore. The movement that he saw wasn't there, the glinting of the tiles wasn't from tiny hooks, the clacking that he heard was from the animatronic holding him. He was safe. He survived. Somehow. They exited the arcade, entering the main lobby. It was the central part of the Pizzaplex, a place that was vast enough to hold hundreds of people, but completely empty at this time of night. The tiled floors stretched out around them, the little trails of animal footprints painted on the floor. Fox prints, bear prints, chicken prints, alligator prints, all of them leading to the corresponding characters' different areas. To the left was Chica's area, to the right was Roxy's, and opposite to the arcade was Monty's. In the middle was some sort of pit in the floor, filled with an attraction that he couldn't see at this angle. The whole place, filled with so much joy during the day, was now shut down. Cartoonish depictions of the characters stared blankly at nothing. Neon lights were dead and gray, the empty air smelling of pizza and cupcakes. Silvery starlight peeked down from the tall domed windows above, speckling each surface of white droplets. Gregory's gaze passed over all of it, veins fizzing with unease. This was so wrong. He wasn't supposed to see the mall in this state. It felt illegal. Freddy turned to one of the outer walls, entering a dark room and setting Gregory down. There were shuffling noises, the only thing visible being Freddy's bright, comet blue eyes. Only when Freddy returned with bandages did he question why they were here. What happened? Gregory asked, unable to recall most of the last few minutes. Why did he... You're hurt, Freddy said, bright eyes staring at him through the dark. Let me see your leg. What? Gregory followed his gaze down to his shoeless foot. The sock was only barely clinging on, the bottom part of it in ribbons with red seeping into the white fabric. Something about it stung. Badly. Gregory kicked the rest of the sock off, shining the Fazwatch's light down onto his ankle with a shiver. It wasn't as bad as he had expected, but maybe it was just because of shock. The tiny hooks seemed to have done more damage to his shoe and the sock than his actual foot. But a part of his toe was still cut open with layers of claw marks. Freddy stooped down to Gregory, peeling the large bandages open. Wait, I can do it. Gregory insisted, pulling his hurt foot away from Freddy with a shiver of fear. No, just stay still, Freddy told him. I know how to do this. Gregory wasn't brave enough to disobey. He held his foot out, leg trembling in agitation, as Freddy reached to it. The big metal bear drew away whenever he saw that, glancing back over to Gregory. Sorry, Gregory winced, remembering to not make eye contact. I'm sorry, I promise I won't hurt you, Freddy reassured him. I'll be very careful. He closed his eyes, taking in sharp breaths as the animatronic carefully prodded around, cleaning it up with stinging chemicals. Every single second, he expected for Freddy's claws to sink back into the wounds and tear them up even more, to punish Gregory after seeing him being stupid and bad. But instead, Freddy was very gentle, wrapping up the dozens of tiny cuts with bandages after they were all washed. Is that okay? Freddy asked. Gregory peeked down. The bandages were stained a dark pink now, stiff pains warning for him to not move them too much. He swung his foot over the chair, pressing it experimentally into the ground, wincing. It wasn't too bad, really. It felt like his skin had gotten all scratched, but he could still move the foot around, even though it stung. Gregory stared back up at Freddy, some strange thing moving inside of him. He hadn't hurt him, not even a little. Why? Was this a trick? What was the catch? Realizing he was supposed to respond, Gregory nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Thank you. You're welcome, Freddy sighed. Do you want me to give you a ride around? Dread withered in him. No, I'm fine, Gregory insisted, putting his weight on the foot gingerly. He limped a few steps, getting used to the stinging protest. Nothing important had been torn up, it seemed. The only thing that he regretted was that he didn't have a shoe for that foot anymore. He had to put more pressure on his heel instead of the ball of his foot, but he would much rather walk alone than ride inside Freddy's torso. Another wad of guilt and confusion stopped him from continuing. Freddy? Yes? Why did Moon attack me? Freddy was silent. When he snuck a look back up, he appeared just as confused as Gregory felt. What did he say? Freddy asked. Gregory racked his brain, trying to remember anything in the last few minutes except for life or death panic. He said I was with the acting guy. He said I was a capturing robot or something. Freddy sighed deeply, then said, Moon is quite paranoid. You're not the first kid that he's done that to. Why does he have those hooks? Gregory squeaked next. He's supposed to take care of kids, right? Oh, those are a security protocol, Freddy explained. He watches over the most vulnerable of our children. When a kidnapper comes, Son has to be ready. Gregory decided not to ask for more details, only nodding and falling quiet again. They exited the first station together, Gregory still marveling that he still had 2 feet. However, before he felt too safe with Freddy, a new sound stopped them in their tracks. Gregory shut his mouth. Freddy's ears perked, the lavender earring twinkling in the dark. Footsteps. Large, clunking footsteps. Gregory, a distorted voice called. I know you're here. Where are you? Incident reports, 2072 to 2077. In the early morning of April 7th, 2073, a child by the name of Michelle Adams snuck a small Pomeranian dog into the daycare by hiding it in her backpack. She released the dog to play, and upon seeing it, Son was sent into a panic. He threw all of the children onto higher ground in the play structures and was chased by the dog until he climbed all the way up into the play structures and onto the flagpole. Employees were sent in to calm the situation, but even after the dog was caught and taken away, Son refused to come down from the pole until the collar was used. Assessment. Son's programming could not recognize what the dog was, as he's never seen an animal before, and thought that it was an unidentified threat from how loud it was barking. Will add a programming to handle animals soon. Victor Miller. On October 3rd, 2073, Chica was fulfilling her duties of participating in a birthday party as usual, and ended up getting into a conversation with one of the more secluded teenagers that decided to sit near her, named Penny Martinez. When the brief party session ended, Chica was supposed to move back to the kitchen to start on the cake for the next customers, but instead stayed with Penny. Chica explained later that something just fell off, and because of that decided to ask Penny if she was okay, once they were out of earshot from her younger siblings. At that, Penny began to break down, and Chica moved her to a more private space at her request. Once they were alone, Penny admitted that she was extremely depressed and was considering suicide, even though she felt extremely guilty because of how that action would affect her younger brother. Despite not having a real protocol for this, Chica stayed with her and convinced her that she would be okay, everything would be okay, and to just hang in there until she could get help. Once Chica was comfortable leaving Penny alone, she decided to alert her manager on what happened, who was able to report the distressed girl to her parents to get her more professional help. Assessment. While the animatronics don't have a specific protocol for this, Chica's personality chip certainly had a role in this course of action. In this case, it's good that she won against her usual protocol to move to the next party instead of staying behind with Penny. We should definitely give them a real program on what to do in a situation like this so they stay alert for signs of distress like this. Victor Miller. Patch requests. Chica needs oven mitts. Parents are complaining that children will not learn about oven safety if they see her operating one without mitts. Add daily protocol to clean fur to avoid messiness. Hello everyone again. I already said what I need to say inside the pre-episode talk, so I'll just reiterate here. Right now, I can definitely post the next episode next Friday, so be ready for it at about like 3 o'clock next week. About 3 o'clock? Again, it takes a long time for it to actually load, but whatever. In that time, pretty much. Next week, on Friday, just like normal. Okay, so thank you, bye! Thanks everyone for watching it. I can't believe you actually finished the episode, oh my goodness. Thank you everyone who actually watched to the end.